What's up, everybody? Bring these dudes in.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, what's
Good.
up?
How are
Good,
you?
bro. How are you?
I am chilling.
I got one more. Not that dude. Wait till Chewy gets in here. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good, bro. How
Good, man. Easy
about you?
day.
Getting
Fucking lazy day.
lazy. I was
Yeah.
shooting today. It was actually like very nice weather for the first time out on the range. Not sweating your balls off.
Hmm.
I don't think I can't
We're
get.
due. It'll be hot through the rest of the month, and then we're gonna chill out.
All right, well, let's kick it off. If Chewy jumps in here, I'm not. He's not responding to the request. All right. I think we just get right into it. Jared, thanks for coming on, man. So this whole this discussion, I think, kind of starts from uh, one guy, Kinetic Concepts Group, has been putting like videos together on timers, kind of like body cam and doing, you know,
Breaking them
this is what,
down, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
breaking them down from a metric standpoint, right?
Yep.
It's been pretty interesting, and that started the whole discussion, right, about splits. And I guess I didn't see the original comments, but guys were referencing a Bills drill,
Yeah.
right, and kind of the Bills drill in terms of like an engagement, um, in fast splits, and then there were a lot of back and forth. The comments got pretty cluttered, right? Because I think you reshared it, didn't you?
The one today. Yeah. Yeah. Or the one from the other day. Yeah. Not the Bill drill one. The Bill drill one. It was an experiment that he was doing. I guess I saw it. I didn't pay much attention to it. But
Uh,
the live breakdown one I liked just because it showed how fast people can drop. You know what I mean? It's like that's what a lot of people just don't get. Like talk about split times and things like that, and giving your brain time to react because it's an unpredictable movement. That guy took one round. I've seen dudes take several rounds and just eat them like it's candy. You know what I mean? So you just don't know how it's going to happen.
right. So that kind of that plays into right, and I think and stop me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you're definitely an advocate of a certain metric I've seen, right? Like, hey, you and it comes out the way that I receive is like you can't shoot faster than this, you cannot process faster than that.
So, well, it's not really a shooting thing. It's just like a life processing thing. Like when you Google like your visual processor speed, like your audible processor speed is a lot faster, like almost like 20% faster than your visual. So like what you think is happening has actually already happened like under speed. So I'm just trying to give myself time to turn it off. Because like when you turn the faucet on, it's running until you turn it off. Every doesn't get a yes. I mean, especially if you're starting to rail it real. And I'm just like with me, if you always train to burn it under stress or when it goes down, you're gonna burn it because like that's what you're used to doing. That's the speed you're used to operating at. So like to me, I don't ever say don't go fast. Like a build drill is a great assessment of grip, stance, recoil management. But you can get your split times faster than if that target was moving. And it becomes almost like a range drill where I can lock in real hard and like hammer one target. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's
Yeah.
a misconception of time and like the actual, like the numbers that people use. So like if you go to force science training or if you go to any of the use force seminars and we start talking about like visual processing speed, and you're 100% right, like your auditory reaction times are much faster than your visual and your touch. So it's touch, auditory, and then vision, right? So your touch reaction's faster than your audible's faster than vision. But all of that data that people have pulled out isn't to explain and I posted it as a comment on Unconvincing Undercover made a post and I posted on it.
Yeah.
It isn't an antidote to an overshoot. It explains why they happen.
Right.
So the processing speed and the actual ability to shoot and then stop shooting, that explains why we have overshoots. But shooting at a slower rate does not prevent them. So you're still going to have guys, if you're shooting half-second splits, and you're every half second you're firing around.
I don't ever advocate like a half second.
Well, I want
to be right there at 0.25, as close to 0.25. Like I want to be on the great edge. I'm just trying to give myself a little bit of something to turn it off.
Right. So, but hear me out on this. Like
okay.
if time were the actual factor, so at 0.25, 0.5, even 1 second splits, if the individual steps left or right, jumps or drops, it's not always about drop. Or if you have a visual barrier transition in between you as you're moving, the ability to stop it within that time. So if it happens 0.2 right before you fire that next shot, regardless of the split time, they have dropped and you've overshot. So that's why I say that it isn't about timing that actually has anything to do with the reason we have overshoots or multiple rounds going over. It isn't the speed of the shots, it's the ability to actually see what's going on. So I think Matt and I, like, we'll get into visual cues and things later that you should be paying attention to. But the speed at which someone's shooting, like when we put it into a training context, individuals who invest time in running a gun at as fast as they can within absolute control are the ones that we see in reality shooting actually much slower and only shooting what they can see. It's the people with low training or who always trained like bullseye or to shoot slow, like the old methodology in police training, that just tend to have that cycle the gun as fast as it'll shoot and plastic Jesus make this man go away. So it doesn't have anything to do with about how they've trained. It's the untrained shooter that it tends to actually shoot too fast, faster than what they can control the gun and see. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. Like an untrained person, I get it. They're scared.
I think when you look at law enforcement as a whole, somebody who has been through the academy, is qualified, and carries a gun, but does not practice outside of what they're required to by their department is categorized, in my mind, as an untrained person.
Yeah.
I think that percentages and like they are from a legal liability standpoint trained, right? But in reality, what you see is they're not trained. They're not trained or prepared for that bad day or what's about to happen, right? So,
and you're absolutely right.
So I think here's my question, because I love. So I started looking up force science shit, not force science. I don't care about the data aggregation and that shit they do, because that is like the crutch that a lot of dudes lean on. Trainers, whole companies build it off of, right?
Yeah.
The best that I can gather, force science is very similar to NTOA. They're self-appointed in charge of something, but it's a for-profit fucking organization. They're 100%. Not doing this shit out of the goodness of their hearts, right? So on the website, right, there's training that they provide and all of this shit. Now, it's easier to, from a training standpoint, if I tell you that I want you to be, slow is smooth, smooth is fast methodology, and, don't accuracy is speed is fine, accuracy is final. That is a much easier way to train than from a performance-based training way where we're trying to get you to recognize what's happening while it's happening and not after the fact. The two things are just, they are outside and in absence of the application of that skill, right? It's range training, right? And even if you're doing a force on force scenario, that's not real. I mean, think we've all seen it, right? The shit that guys will do, all officers, military, I've seen it, I've done it. Like the shit you will try to do in a force on force situation, if you were to try that with live ammunition and a live gun, you're getting worse hit percentage than like the national averages. So really, let me ask you this. Do you believe though, right, all of this stuff where how long it takes to react to visual stimuli, auditory, I get it, whatever. It's 180 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds, right? There's a good study I read. I'll tell you about the results of it after I ask this question. Do you believe that those like figures are kind of averages? Are they hard and final? Or is that something that you can train to be better at?
So I read an article on it. People are better. Like it goes down to like 0.20 to up to 0.31. They did ask at Duke, and like that's like where they were at. You know what I mean? So then you just got to go, and then you can't train your visual processor speed to be faster. The science says you can't. I don't freaking know. I mean, I'm just going by believing what they say. So is it a hard, fast number? No, I think people have God-given talents that other people don't. Like, you know, some are more athletic, some are, you know, it's just how it works. People are smarter than other people.
So if you can't, so I'm not asking like from a study standpoint. I was asking like from your own, because I will tell you that is categorically false that you can't train your visual processor speed. Otherwise, we would never train CQB.
Well, no,
You would
no.
you would
I
never
what you're
get
saying.
better at it.
You can get better at it by seeing things over and over, and you can make a decision on it by seeing it over and over again. But it says you can get faster by things you repeat and do, but unpredictable things you can't make it faster. Like
So
that's what bro. I'm just saying what the study says. Like I don't know, but I mean I get what you're saying. I'm still I want to get faster because I've seen it before and I can make a decision on it before.
So,
I mean that's what training's for. So
all right. So law enforcement trains Rolodex style training, right? It's exactly what you're describing. I'm going to see a situation. Now I have the solution. I put that in the Rolodex. I'm going to see a situation. Now I have the solution. I'm going to put that in the Rolodex. And then the more they're exposed to that situation, you know, the easier it is for them to find that card in their Rolodex, pull it out, and give the solution in reality. But that is not how training should be. That's not how higher level guys are training, which is why you're training for unpredictability, right? You're working off of principles rather than specific solutions to a problem you've already seen, right? Because you go into environments and engagements, right? There's always variables of the dudes you don't know what they're going to do, right? It would be, I think we all agree on that. It'd be impossible to see every possible situation of a traffic stop or a domestic or any of the problems that you face in the law enforcement world, right? The same way on the military side, dude, there's no way you could plan for like
Every contingency.
every contingency or just every inevitability,
100%.
right? So,
but again, like when you train fighting or any kind of combatives, when he throws a punch, you get punched at. You've seen it before. You can react. You're a lot. You've seen some things. Not be, you know, the jab, cross, uppercut combo you're going to catch, but you could probably catch him with one of those. Like, so to me, it's not wrong. I don't do a lot of scenario-based training because it just takes too long and you don't get reps and you're not really doing anything. But again, that's just kind of I'm a huge skills and processor guy. Like that's what I just want you to have the skills. Like for me, when I train you, I want you to be an A-, B+ shooter when you're called out, midnight, cold, hungry, whatever it is. You know what I mean? you can get a course of fire or something, and you can run that course of fire. You can hang with pretty much not the top dogs, you know what I mean? But you can be a good shooter and a well thinker. And that's kind of, I want you kind of to take a little bit purposefully take it off. Not that you should train to 0.25 seconds. Does that make sense? Like, you're purposely taking it off so at least you can start going. Also see, like, when people start running different targets, their split times are different than their target to target times, but when you shoot meat, it moves, so your target is always going to be different. So you should need to be tracking it. Does that make sense? And I want my split times to slow them down enough, because you could also see guys really get fast on the split times. It's like, let's just say 5 shots, like 4 to the body on one and then moved over to the next, and they're hitting 0.18, and then it's like a 0.6 over to the next target, when you could have just turned it down a little bit, and then your target split would have been the same as like a 0.25.
So I think
I'd rather push them to match at speed.
I mean, I would like to, but it just doesn't happen, because I think it's just like, it's almost like you got to take a little bit off to be able to move and think and know what your next thing's coming. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't ever push to it. I just come with, you can't, and like, it's something that I made up. It's the science is there.
It makes sense what you're saying. I understand where you can come to that conclusion, but like, if I had an array of targets, a very small target, a very large target, and then a medium target, if I shoot them, the splits to me are irrelevant. It's like, how long does it take to complete the task? What you're saying, this is what I'm taking from it. What you're saying is, if it takes me, 4 seconds to complete the task, you're worried about making the splits and transitions equal across it to match that 4 seconds, whereas I am trying to get my transitions sped up to match the speed at which I can complete it to get it done faster. So if that's what it sounds like to me. Like, you're saying, I can only do it at this speed, but I can shoot the targets really fast, but I have to transition slower, so I want my splits to be slower so they're all the same, which I still think you're better off
that's
transferring energy as fast as possible.
I'm trying to push my target to target speed as fast as I can, which is typically right around 0.25. And I've found if I take a little bit off of splits, my target to target is faster.
Yeah, I just think it's missing the visual cues. It's just missing that I want to do everything as fast as I possibly can. And if my cue's on a target, whether it's moving or not, because that's what's going to tell me I can shoot. So if I get to a small target and when in recoil I come off it, I have to wait for that dot to come back for permission to fire the next round. If I'm on a large target and I fire one and it never leaves, I can just press again.
Yep.
so.
Because
I think this is where it's like it gets muddy, right? Because we're talking about target to target transitions, and like, are we talking about target to target transitions or staying on one target, right? The reason you're
target, like, so here's just like one target, it's the same threat, but he's now here.
Right, I understand that. That's shooting a mover.
So like, that's what I'm talking about.
That's a whole nother strategy, right? That isn't consistent with the way historical guys are trained, right? Front sight focus, you cannot do that. You cannot look at your front sight and track a target.
Right.
Like, that's been dispelled. A lot of guys now, that's where I think it gets into, they need to back off or whatever, because they're missing cues. Another part of training, right? The vision piece of it, where they're playing this game where they're going target dot, target dot, target dot constantly, and somewhere in there they're shooting. What I'm like arguing is not that, an individual scenario. It's all this, okay, the data's out, right? Like, none of these studies are done on like, it's all done like post right? Like post shooting. Right.
Yeah, and it's not reliable information all the time.
Right. They look at the shooting and this is what happened, but then there's like the scientific data about, oh, well, you know, reaction to stimuli, like a foveal reaction is whatever, however many milliseconds. And what I'm saying is I think that that can be trained in absent like that's counter to what the study shows, right? And case in point, like one, it's very hard to find like consistent numbers with any of this shit, right? Just from Google search, it was kind of funny the range that you saw. Everything from points 60 milliseconds, which is 0.06 seconds, all the way to 300 milliseconds, right? That's a huge gap. There was an interesting study they did where they were testing reaction times to a trigger press of professional gamers, right? Video game people.
Yeah.
And now those guys, from the way the test was structured, is they were watching a visual thing. It was a color, and with one color you pull the trigger on this hand, and with another color you pull the trigger on that hand, right? Not a trigger of a gun, just two little triggers to measure the reaction
On the
time.
controller.
Yeah, and those professional gamers, right? Those guys averaged around 155 to 166 milliseconds, right? 1.5 to 1.6. So I don't think you can, for me, I'm always suspicious. Anytime someone leans on data and makes always and never statements about data or about one instance or something like that, I think it warrants like talking about it, especially when it's not their personal experience. It's like it's secondhand watching something and we can pick it apart,
Yeah.
and look at the metrics and things like that. But when it goes counter to what I've experienced myself, a lot of different times, then I have to question, right? Are those always and never statements? Are they actual facts? Or is it one of those things like, hey, well, I'm going to say this 3 times out loud, and if nobody laughs or challenges it, then that becomes kind of the rule of
Right.
law, which I think that happens a lot, right? Especially whenever it's in the promotion of like a shooting idea or concept, right? Someone's
Yeah.
individual concept, because that,
So
as we all know, those are very, very rigid things that people don't like to change.
yeah, so I don't like to do all that. So I'll talk about where this became real for me. So my last shooting I was in, we were actually leaving the range to go to lunch. It was a burn it down day on the range. 5 yards, rifles, VTACs, getting it down, changing targets, and I know my splits were at like 1.6, 1.8 that day because we were on the range training. Literally, I was going to lunch. I ended up shooting a guy who was he was in a car, kind of turned sideways and jacked up. I was about 3 to 4 yards away. He went for his gun. I already had my rifle on me. I started burning his chest down, and I was like moving to his head. And as I moved to his head, fired 3 rounds apparently. When he dropped and everything was done, like through the where his head was 2 rounds. They were very close together. They were where his head was. So I had good management, control, had all the things to make the shot, except for he was no longer there. So I don't remember, and I don't ever remember the dot not being there. So like that, and to me, it wasn't a big deal that I hit the windshield and, nothing was there. It was off into the woods. But like when I think about that as being like a teammate, I would hate to like push into my hard corner, burn it, and he drops it, and now I send it through the drywall and where I might have teammates on the other side of the wall. That's where it kind of rang to me. It wasn't target size or whatever. I mean, it was still all easy targets. That's where that's where I'm really deep diving into this and start looking into it because I just didn't want the misses. I'd hate to hit a teammate because of the way.
For me personally, I think you looked in the wrong places, right? I think that's part of that is kind of like an operational discipline, because like what you're describing to me, what I'm hearing is like you had this pre-planned engagement, right? I'm gonna do this and do this, right? Right? I'm gonna shoot him in the chest and then I'm gonna go to the head, right? So
No,
that's
that
like
was a right there as I was shooting, like moving, driving the gun up. So no,
Did you did you
it
feel
wasn't
like
like a
you weren't
Mosaic
getting the result
drill
that
or
you wanted?
I thought maybe I was so close I needed to end it quicker. Does that make sense? Like, I mean, because I mean, it was happening. I mean, I'm going to say it was 8 rounds or something. It was probably under 2.5 seconds. Like, it was a fast engagement, and I don't know why I wasn't ever scared because he went for his gun. He never got his gun. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
right.
So
So that's another thing, right? It's the familiarity with those situations, not recognizing, right? There's if you shot 8 rounds and 6 of them hit his chest and the 2 missed his head, right? That's what I'm hearing, or
no,
thereabouts.
no, no. 5 hit his chest, 1 hit his head, 2 went by past. So
So
6
5 hit his chest.
hit, 5 to the chest, 1 to the head, 2 missed when he dropped.
Yeah, so that's not a like that's emotional fire is what it is. Right? That's not shooting your vision, which is something that I think we all advocate for. And this is where like this gets training pace, right? And what you do when you're training is completely different than application of those skills. Training, we're trying to build huge skill reservoirs, right? And what I've found for myself is shooting aggressive, right? Learning to pay attention to the right things while you're shooting aggressive, recognizing what is objectively assessing what's happening while it's happening and not after the fact pays dividends, right? If I'm, it's you see it in simplest of terms. Go to a race car driving school
So
and drive around a track at 200 miles an hour, and then drive home in your truck at 60 and see how control you're in. And that's where I think the disconnect might be. I
100%.
believe the
So like
training pace needs to be fast.
so that's what so for training, we'll shoot 5 rounds on 1 box. You know what I mean? And then you got to shoot 1 round on 5 different boxes. So I for me I don't train them to shoot one target one way. So it's super easy to shoot quarter-second splits on 1 box. It gets a little sporty shooting 1 on 5 boxes at the same speed. So that's kind of what I just add complexity, not faster time or a different shot.
Hey, Jared, I got a
So I kind of
question for you.
yeah,
You
bro.
done? Hey, where were you at in your career when that shooting happened? Like, how many years did you have on? How many years on SWAT? Was that your first OIS,
No,
or was
no,
that like the tail
no.
end?
That was the very tail end. So I've been in 4 shootings where I was a shooter and like 15 shootings where I'm like getting shot around or at, or you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I was, and people who know me, I'm not very emotional, like an emotional, like I wasn't scared or whatever. I mean, I'm pretty competent, especially at that point in my career. I was very competent and confident that I was going to be able to do.
And was that just a concern that like you had, or was that something, and not to bring up team business stuff, but was that concern shared by like any of your teammates, or was it, where did it kind of come from, or was it kind of just your own thing after the fact thinking about it?
My own thing, thinking about it, I missed something. I missed something at 4 yards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Why did I miss something at 4 yards?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, that's the vision thing. Yeah.
I think missing it 4 yards is a very common occurrence in law enforcement. I don't think you were the exception to the rule, right? And I think this goes back to, you know, an
Well,
idea
no one looked at
about
it like
like
that.
at some point you have what's that?
No one looked at it like, so yeah, like it was acceptable, but it wasn't acceptable to this guy. Like that's why I was trying to fix it. You know what I mean?
No, I understand that. Missing is acceptable in law enforcement. It's proven and documented, right? What I think is like at what point do you have to realize that like putting from a training standpoint, putting a glass ceiling on a training because of a single incident or you know or any type of tactical scenario or data driven thing isn't good. It hasn't worked historically for law enforcement. So, what is the expectation that this is going to now start working? And I do agree with you, right? Target distance and difficulty 100% dictates split times for guys that are shooting their vision, that are shooting reactive, right? They're tying a trigger press to a sight picture, which is an absolute fucking rarity in engagements, right? It's unsighted emotional blind fire from guys that like it doesn't matter how you fucking train, that dude's not training, right? You can watch him. You watch it
Right.
like he's not mentally prepared for that event. He's not physically prepared for it, right? Um, Cognitively, who knows what's going on, right? And I think all of that stuff needs to be factored in, right? You're not going to train all things at one time, but if you want dudes to get better at shooting at paces that mimic what we see on body cam, right, across the board, just as enough like the one that Kinetic Concepts group put up. It was one shot, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
that's a was a good shot. You know, it aligned. And who knows? That officer may train all the time, and he put one in and center mass. It went through, hit the spinal cord. That guy dropped, or whatever happened.
Right.
Right? He got the result that he wanted. And I don't think he didn't shoot again, did he?
Not in that video. I no. It was one shot. He dropped really quick, and I think what he really meant by the video is why he broke down the time is just how he went from shot to like him being flat on the ground. And as people like always say, people don't fall that fast. I think that was more of his point of the video. Like out there, well, people don't take shots like that. So
Well, the one thing that I could say from my experiences about people falling is that it is the consistent thing is it's inconsistent,
100%.
right? So this is where okay, we take one version of data set, right? Like, and as much as you want to argue, see, here it proves my point. Haha, I got you. Okay, off of one, like let's comb the internet and find all the other ones where the guys don't fall.
Oh, 100%. So like just like what you just said, that's pretty much I don't predictable. I want to train for the unpredictable and things happen. And really 2.5, that's I mean, I'm not saying that's where you should set your limits on, especially like a bill drill or something like that. Like that's where everyone's kind of button heads on this thing. You can train at speed so like literally you can take a little bit off and you can feel more comfortable, you feel confident, and your hit percentages go way up, right? And you so like you're sacrificing some thousandths for a higher hit ratio and just better confidence in what you're about to shoot. So that's kind of what I try to push towards. And so it's not really like just a pure hard, if you do it, you're fucking stupid, or, you know, training skills is training skills. You know, in a 2-day class, you don't get too much. You get some skills, but then you got to add, like, because I'm training mostly law enforcement and stuff, you got to add some tactical shooting side to it, if that makes sense. They got to have something to, and I'll tell people holding 2.25 second splits on multiple targets is really, really tough for them. So they're not really slow. They're actually out shooting their headlights at that speed, you know, or they can't pull the trigger. And I'm going to try to get them to as fast as I can get them. And then they bring it down. They purposely bring it down, if that makes sense.
Do you think that training that and having it, and not to ask you your business, what you do, and give away secrets or whatever you do with it. But
There's
then,
no secret.
right? There's no secrets to it. But when we start
Yeah.
doing that and we're training these multiple targets and doing that, like you said, in a class, they're only going to get so good. They're only going to be so decent at it. And then they're going to go back wherever they go. And it's on them, right, to then keep working it from there. My thing with it, and also coming from the competitive side, is, what am I actually working on the training? Am I just working towards the outcome, or am I working towards being able to actually think about what I'm doing every step of the way? Because if you just have a drill where I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 targets, it's really hard to steer, especially cops, right? It's really hard to steer them towards thinking about what they're doing versus just chasing the end number. So if they do your drill and they're like, well, Jared, I did it. I put all the hits in the A zone and I did it at 2.5, 2.7s. They get really attached to that, right? Instead of thinking about, well, why am I doing that and what's the process behind it? I know for us over here in Arizona with training, you know, trying to get guys to get away from that outcome based part of it is really difficult. I'll speak for myself, for getting guys to understand that instead of just looking at what's at the number at the end. They got all the hits. They did it in the time frame that the instructor told me to do it. So I'm good, right? It kind of gets lost in translation. So, how have you been able to set that up so that guys can work it, so that, can they actually take it from training and then take it into real life? What's kind of your process for that,
Well,
or your thoughts on it rather?
just I talk on it. I do it. I work the process on how. So we start single target, then one on each box. Here, hold on. I'll pull up the target real quick. So this is the target we use. Can you guys?
Yeah.
So it's a simple box. Right? So you start out doing like box number 3, 5 rounds. Then you'll move to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you'll move to maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you'll move to, I'll call out like 1, 1, 3, 2, 1, and it's all trying to stay on that same cadence or split time that you're getting those hits, and it's just there's like a reduced A zone box. So that's where I was trying to get to the unpredictable of it. Of like I can call out numbers and you still got to think and shoot and do things. And to me, it's not the end of the, or like, like what I say, you're fucking wrong, or I mean, it's not like, this is just what I have found, and it has worked for several people that I've trained. I get time, but last week, man, that cadence thing really worked for me of slowing it down and doing it, and I burned the old boy down. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's still great things to me.
Yeah,
And I'm sure you guys get them on your end too. It's not like don't ever train with Matt Pronka. He's going to get you killed. Like, that's crazy. Like, it's just.
I routinely get people killed in the streets, if you haven't known that. Like, that's
Dang.
like, I don't necessarily agree with that, right? I think that's like, for me personally, like, that is training that I did in the 90s, in the early 90s. Shoot the boxes, we still got to think. What guys are doing is they're thinking about the number you call. The dudes that shoot those drills, the shooting doesn't run in the background, which ultimately that's the goal, right? I just need the shooting to happen, right? So in order to do that, I have to strip away all of the bullshit, right? This is something that has happened, in the soft military world. How we trained in the 90s was different than in the early 2000s, and then at different levels, it's just different. And the guys that are doing this at the highest levels aren't shooting those colored targets or the box of numbers and stuff like that. Because it was the color, right? The yellow triangle, you call all the shit out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
100%.
That's outcome based training for it's really like it's shooting training for guys who can't shoot.
Right. For me, that was just a cheap man's mover that I can put up on a single backer and you're not wasting a bunch of, you know
No,
what I mean? Like, so
no.
it's not like the most realistic thing
Oh,
in the world.
I agree.
I'm just trying to get you to drive the gun a little bit.
I I agree with that, right? But like so for my like target transitions and shooting a move are completely different things, right? And what you're trying to do with that is different, right? What you're training somebody to do, if you're calling target transition shooting movers, is to trap targets, which is the worst strategy for shooting a moving target, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't ever
Yeah.
trapping
No, no.
trapping
Yeah. No,
trapping
no,
a
no.
target falls apart really quickly as soon as you move, with a pistol outside of 10 yards, with a rifle, outside of 20.
Right.
Um,
I'm not saying trapping him, but
no, but that's really
but
like
what
what
it's
it is.
helping me do, what those boxes is helping you almost do like, it's like JJ Racaza calls like a bump position. Like, I don't want you back on box number one because box number one's gone. So like, I want you working in between those bump
Yeah.
transitions, in between targets.
Yeah. You
I
ever,
mean,
yes. And I agree with that, right? However guys describe it, I think we're probably all in agreement that that third sight picture, the fall through, in multiple targets or track, that's got to go away. That it's not a thing anymore. It was a bullseye strategy to fix mistakes that were going to happen with trigger press by giving you something to do after the trigger press in terms of consistency. I think there's better ways to explain that now. But if you watch anyone, the gun is going to do its thing and be back in battery before dudes can come off the target most of the time, right?
yeah,
Unless you're dragging it off the
yeah,
target. So I understand the word, and this is where I think the words matter, right? The idea like, hey, I'm going to bump when it lifts. Like how many guys do you see now that are programmed to transition where they're on a target and they go to the next target and they move the gun like this?
oh,
You
tons.
watch it all over
That's
for
like, to me,
fucking
that's like,
the
yeah, like
but
that's like
that
a
but
key. Like for me, that's like dudes like tracking through their sights. Like they do like they either do a smiley face or like a rainbow to get over
It's like
there.
simulating recoil and dry fire. It's the
Yes.
same shit. Guys are like, and now I'm over
yeah,
here
yeah.
because they were.
And in reality, if you put this on a camera and you slow it down, the gun's back, the back and flat, it's in that wobble phase where it just needs to move, from here to here. It doesn't need
Yeah.
to do this.
Right.
And,
Just need to go laterally, straight line.
yeah, and that's where I think it's so I understand like, you shoot the targets, it's a way to like logistically, it's easy. Everybody's got one target, you got a bunch of scoreable zones. But what I would challenge is that we go back to like the application of this. Like you're you're almost you're not visually doing anything with that target. The target's so damn noisy, you're almost forcing dot focus, right? If you look at what's going on that target, right, based off what I saw, there's three
Yes.
colors, right? There's a black, there's a white, and there's a
Yeah.
gray, right? The target's noisy as fuck, right? That's like the gun sight targets that they shoot that are like camouflage silhouettes.
Yeah.
They
Yeah. Yeah.
purposefully make those noisy so you stare at the front sight post. So you're giving guys something very visually irritating and distracting to look at, and probably never talking about visual precision, right? Where now, if we talk about visual precision in terms of a target that moves after it's been hit, that's what we're trying to achieve, right? And in my opinion, there's better ways to do it. I want you to look to the point you want to shoot, and as the target changes attitude, you look to a different point. If you're now trained and programmed to where your training pace is so fast and aggressive, super nasty, predictive, and doing a lot of different things, bills and doubles and all that, and then now you're applying a reactive shooting engagement strategy where I'm tying a sight picture to every trigger press. Now the only discussion we can have is how fast can I see acceptable? Because I've already programmed the visual precision it takes to shoot very, very aggressively. Now at some point, you got to do something that nobody wants to ask him to do. You need to be a professional and have some operational maturity and learn how to apply this stuff in the context of whatever you're in. And I think that by tightening up vision stuff, right? And a lot of it has to do. I just had this conversation with Kyle DeFore and Bill Blowers. You know, we were throwing B8s up on IPSCs with white backers. And once I explained it to them, that is the noisiest fucking target on the planet, right? It's a white backer with a brown IPSC on it, a tan bordered repair center with black circles and white rings. And you're telling me to look through all that shit and be really visually precise? No, every two different types of guys. They look to the black circle or they look to the white, the color contrast between the repair center and the IPSC.
Right.
And I think if you remove all those distractions, you can get a better outcome with what you want guys to do on the vision side in terms of aiming. And dude, that's the cognition piece of shooting, right? Is what I see acceptable. Now I'm programmed to tie acceptable sight picture to a trigger press. Does that make sense?
And 1%. I mean, I'm not saying what your visual cues are wrong. I think like on this thing, we need like some neuroscientists to come and tell us about how the brain reacts to like a visual response, which I don't think any of us got that kind of knowledge to talk about. You know what I mean?
No, I don't think that knowledge has any. Dude, I've always we'd have guys come into the unit like big heads and putting cameras that look at your eyes and all this shit. And like, dude, made a t-shirt. It's like, dude, don't over science my shooting, bro. Like it's, I think a lot of this stuff, you know, I don't need to know about extensive physiological happenings in my body to know that forced marching makes dudes hard. Putting weight on and walking for extended distances hardens your joints, right? Gives you a certain level of anaerobic and mentally conditions you. It's worked for years, you know?
Yeah.
And I think what guys will do, this is where you said it, tactical shooting, right? I believe.
I was just like, for like the lack of a better word, I guess. I mean, if you have practical shooting or just shooting people or even an animal, it doesn't.
No,
like, you know what I mean? So
I understand what you're saying, but like to me, shooting, right? At the end of the day, it's energy delivery with a tool. I want to be able to do the most of it, right? If you think of it, do I a hammer and a nail? If I have the ability to hit the nail one time and the nail goes in every fucking time, do I want that as a framer of a house? That's all we're doing with pistols and rifles, I believe. Is like, I want to make the bullets go where I want them to go as fast as I can possibly get them there. Now,
just real quick, is everyone from your old unit wearing a "Don't over science my shooting"?
No, there's dudes that love it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we're two dudes, same camp, or same thing, working together, doing things, trying to make people better. We just have a little bit different philosophy, and like I think it's great.
Oh, I agree. It's only this is just my view.
Right.
Like it's not, but what I think it's a scapegoat, right? If I want to, I heard Jared Reston say 2-5 splits. That's what I trained to. I'm gonna be ready that day. No, you're gonna be the dude that shoots all 17 rounds. The suspect still being a suspect, and then you try to put your fucking reload in backwards. Like
that's the thing. It's like that's like someone listening to Jared Reston on a podcast or a YouTube. Not even like a podcast, because we're deep diving it here. But like they didn't take a class with me, and where I talk about training to different things and getting faster and then taking it off purposely. I'm not trying to tell you that this is the holy grail and this is where you need to get to. I want you to be as fast as you can, but purposely take a little bit off. Just because I do believe in the science of your brain.
So let me okay.
Go ahead, man.
Let me throw a specific question to Chris and Matt. Matt, I'll start with you because you're not talking enough. Matt's usually much, much louder than this. Crazy. Flipping the camera off and everything. No, so not to talk specifics, right, about your most recent shooting, but talk to like from a vision standpoint, like some of the things we're talking about, right? In that instance, and I know kind of talk to to John about this before when I was out there. Does that ever enter into your mind? Like, because this is where I think words matter, right? I think asking someone to take a little off is an unrealistic expectation in a fight.
Well, that you're not going to take it off in the fight. That's what I'm saying. Take it off in the training. Always like just level your training. If you got to burn it down, burn it down. Then maybe end it with an accuracy bull or something. Does that make sense? Just kind of don't always end with a burn it down. Because like I talked to guys from your arena, and he was talking about a car like a V-bed driving up the street, and he said he stepped off the curb and started letting it. It was 7 yards away, but it was 150 yards away because that's just kind of what he was training to do real quick, and then it just took him, 3 or 4 rounds to be like, all right, chill out, let's just get these going. And it's just kind of like a training thing, if that makes sense. It's just I feel like you are going to do what you're trained to do. You can out-train some bad habits so you don't do things that the people say you're going to do, but you'll also do what you're supposed to do because that's what you trained and put the time in to do.
All right, Matt.
I'll say that I am definitely that guy that pushes it every single time. And sometimes, I'm not the best shooter that day at training or whatever it might be. In terms of when it became real, I honestly had no conception of how fast I was shooting. After the fact, watching it, it was fast. And I've received some, hey, you probably shouldn't have been shooting that fast type things, but the result that I needed to get, I got it. And it was acceptable. And everything was accounted for. And there's, 1,000 different things that are different about it, considering that there were 8 other guys that were involved in that whole thing as well, with each their different experiences also. But the last thing that was on my mind, I'll tell you honestly, the only thing that was on my mind is like, if this guy is able to gain an inch of ground, like someone's probably going to die. So my urgency at that point was, how can I end this as quick as possible and get it to stop? And that's what facilitated the actions to go from there. And, looking back at it now, like hindsight's that thing, right? And I try to not, you spend a lot of time thinking about it, right? Every single day, you probably think about it at some point. But for what I was presented at that moment, for what I had and what I needed to do, it was acceptable in my mind, and I got the result that I needed. And there definitely was that point where things were changing. The target was changing. If we want to call it a transition, it was definitely, it could have fallen into that category as well. And I was amazed at how precise I needed to be, because it was dark. There was a lot of other stuff going on. We were actively being shot at. So, there were obviously elements there that were not present in training, right? And how do you recreate those, right? Unless you want to put the new guy down at the end of the berm and he's going to launch rounds at us while we're training, right? That's not realistic. But that's been my experience with it. And then having been witness to it multiple times as well. That's always something that guys seem to talk about after the fact, is that the result was good, but they're impressed about how well they actually did. And I don't know, that could be a whole nother hour conversation about whether or not it was the training or their mindset and their application of it. I'm not sure. Like I said, that's a whole nother hour, but I'll send it to Chris so he can chime in.
So we've made a bunch of different comments. We're talking science, we're talking speed, the ability of the human mind to make sense of what's going on and then react to it and have that action actually take place, right? So what I want to talk about, the only thing I want to leave people with that watch this, is the science part of it is not the antidote to the end result. It explains why things happen. That's all the science does. It explains why certain things occur. It gives us a baseline of human performance. It lets us know that a typical person, of the people tested, these were the results that they had, and they frame into this average window. So we start to use those numbers to try to make sense of them. And you cannot apply them to training and then expect the same result, because the speed of the splits is irrelevant if they're misses. The speed of the splits is irrelevant if they're hitting a non-vital target area and actually slowing this person down. all of that's irrelevant. What's important is, at least in my experience, the people in my interviews and my own experiences, what you're seeing happen in front of you varies greatly based on how a person has trained and what they've experienced. I've had several officers say the same thing you did, Jared. Like, I never lost my dot. How did I miss twice? Well, he wasn't there anymore. And most likely because you were looking at your dot, you didn't recognize that he went down. And I asked him, I said, did you close an eye? Did you aim in? He was, he's 30 yards across the street. No, I'm sure he was there. I know he was there. I was firing, and then he was gone. Okay, that explains how we had to go into the car behind him. Don't worry about it. There's nobody back there. Backdrop's nice and safe. But that explains the reason that 2 rounds went there. They went precisely where you aimed. There was not occupied by a person anymore. The visual part of that, like, how did you not recognize that, had nothing to do with how fast he was shooting. It became his vision and his sight picture. If his sight picture was a dot, it was irrelevant as to what it was on until, everything caught up and like, oh, that guy's gone. And then it's the reaction that everybody likes to quote is the reason the shooting stopped. And 2 rounds went just barely past this guy as he fell. So we talk a lot about, like, there's so many topics that got brought up that I want to make sense of. But when you're talking about the speed of shooting and the ability to change something, like change that shooting to a stop shooting part, it doesn't have anything to do with how fast the person is shooting. The easiest thing to do is pull up the videos of guys that have emptied magazines over a guy laying on the ground. The guy will hit the ground and people just keep shooting, right? It doesn't have anything to do with their shooting. They didn't make the decision to stop, which again, doesn't have anything to do with the speed at which they're shooting. I want guys to learn what it feels like to run a gun at that speed and actually pay attention to what's happening with the dot on the target. Matt and I have shot a couple times together where I don't care if you had that target jumping or moving. My vision was so burned into the center of that thing, and they were like 25 yards shooting bill drills. And it was just so effortless. And like, that is what this is supposed to look like. And I can't recreate it every time. But I can tell you in that moment, I don't really care if the target had dropped. If it moved, I would have stopped shooting because my vision point would have moved. I would have lost that precision as to what I was looking at. I don't know. I could go on for a long time about performance metrics from our people, the past 80 people that I've interviewed at work who've been in shootings, and the vast changes in every one of their perception of what happened. I can tell you that our highest trained guys, the guys who take it very serious and perform on the range and training at a very high level and a very fast level, they're burning it down, in their shootings are not shooting fast. I think that's because they have control. Our people who I never see at the range, unless they, it's their time once a year to come and qual, those are the plastic Jesus make it stop people. Like, the gun just starts running and they hit the guy a few times, he drops, and then they're done.
Well, they're running as soon as they pull it out of the holster. It's probably running on the ground as it's getting up there.
It's a reaction. So I think that final thing I'll say is, like, you need to train to a level where the shooting part is so precise and so automatic, and the ability to hang on to the gun when it starts doing whatever your reaction to it is allows you to control it better. Let the science explain why you had misses. Let it explain why you had shootovers. That's what it's there to do. It is not there to dictate your training or say that there's a maximum level as to which you can shoot. That is not what it says. It just explains why things happen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. I think it's how we explain it is important. What you say, the words you use, because people are going to take different things away from it. And it's social media. The one thing I would say for the dudes that are like, because the kinetics concept guy was like, people who talk about snake oil salesmen are the salesmen. Spend more time fucking training instead of diagnosing videos and shit. And then I'll listen to what you say about training as soon as you prove to me that you have an understanding at a very high level what you're doing. Because I don't think that exists. It's worthwhile to listen to this, hey, have these conversations that are, but I think who you have the conversations with is important. They're going to cut us off, dude. thanks for everybody coming on. Jared, I really appreciate you making time.